And we're live.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Lisa.
Hey, Josh. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good Wednesday.
It is. It's a decent Wednesday. Our respective locations have not been wiped off the face of the earth by tornadoes, so I consider that to be a win.
That's true. I was wondering the other day if that was going to be the case, but
I was too, and I don't know how it is in Joplin. Of course, down here it's actually cleared off into a chilly but just absolutely gorgeous spring evening.
yes, same here. It is very pretty out. So
I was looking at the sky right before we went live, and I'm going, this reminds me of something. This reminds me of something. What does this remind me of? Oh, it reminds me of my favorite romanticism painter that I always get the order of his name wrong, but it's Casper David Friedrich, who actually died in 1840 in Dresden, born in 1774. If you are not familiar with his work, look him up. His paintings are incredible.
they are. I'm a fan as well. So
I could never actually get one of his paintings, but I would love to have a copy of a print at some point because it's just incredible. But his use of light is really, really powerful. It's a hallmark of the Romanticism era painters in Germany, and it reminds me of that right now. I wish I could effectively capture it.
That's true. It does have that sort of look to the sky.
It does. It's one of the things I love about spring in the Ozarks. Spring in the Ozarks can be a lot moodier than people realize.
That's a good way of putting it.
and I mean that mostly lovingly. It's not all pastels and roses.
That's true. Very true. So I guess housekeeping, we ought to mention that we are going to be in Newtonia on April 23rd.
Yes.
For a public event and tour and investigation at the Ritchie Mansion.
This is going to be a fun event.
Yes,
tickets are selling. So
yes, they are selling. So don't wait too long. You can get them ordered at the Paranormal Science Lab website, paranormalsciencelab.com. And we're actually going to cover three spots during the evening, including the Civil War Cemetery. And if it's anything like the last time we were there, it's going to be great.
It is. I love the location. Of course, Jim Ridenauer is awesome to have as a host. And for people who don't know, and I think backing up, Newtonia itself has an incredible Civil War history, including two battles and a lot of partisan violence surrounding the entire area. Something that if you were not familiar, if you'd not dug into the history a little bit, it would be so easy to overlook. And folks, could drive by and have no clue that all of these incredible things took place. And the Ritchie Mansion itself is haunted.
Yes.
And is just it's exquisitely beautiful. It's just an incredible space to be in. And one of the things first of all, I love about the work that we do is we get to go into locations that are historic and beautiful and interesting and the kind of places you wouldn't normally get to go. The very best, you just get to drive by and wonder what the provenance of this location is. We get to do that on a regular basis. I love that. But the upcoming event is an open invitation that you all get to do that with us and go in these locations in the Ritchie Mansion, in-depth discussion in terms of its history as well as the paranormal events there, and then also going to really access to both cemeteries, the one that is on the property, which is significant, and then the Civil War Cemetery that is, to me, almost otherworldly in and of itself.
It is, and a very unique space, and we we'll be starting out at the community center. I mean, it's and the town has interesting history beyond the Civil War as well. It's just going to be a good time. So come on out, get your tickets so you don't wait too long, because there's only so many people that can fit into the Ritchie Mansion. So
Then, and that is also a hallmark of many of this era's buildings. Even the large homes are only so large.
that's right. They are not as large as we are accustomed to large homes being, and often have smaller rooms. So that is a consideration. So don't lose out. It's not a place that you get to go to all the time, and proceeds do help support the house. So it's a
Yes,
win.
they do. And I love that many of the locations, Ritchie is one of them, Kendrick is another. That these are extraordinarily historic locations, but they are being preserved via private means.
Yes, very private means, and um, uh, people have to step up and write those checks, and so these kind of events do help. So
Yes, they do. And so not only is it a fun evening that we all get to hang out in this cool location, but it is helping a great cause. So check out, get your tickets. We look forward to seeing you there.
and then we need to plug. We have a large event coming up in October.
Yes. Oh, October Country.
Yes.
Hosted by Dark Ozarks in Joplin, Missouri. Very, very excited. This October 15th, I believe.
Yes. It's going to be a day-long event, and it's at the VFW number 534 on North Main Street. Various things will be going on. Agenda will be coming out. And we are very grateful to our sponsor, Always Buying Books of Joplin, that is assisting with that event as well. And,
Yes.
if you are not familiar with Always Buying Books, check them out. If you aren't in the, I'm still reading.
I'm still reading.
And if you're not in the area, check them out on Facebook, Always Buying Books, and friends who like Always Buying Books group, and a lot of goodies are listed in there for sale that you can purchase as well. And if you come through, stop in. It's a great place to be.
I am honored and thrilled that Dark Ozarks is being sponsored by Always Buying Books. I love the fact in this era that I have books from Always Buying Books, even though I have yet to actually physically go to the location. And next time I'm in Joplin, we are going to fix that.
Yes, we are. And probably do a live feed from there too.
I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I look forward to that. I am a unreconstructed addict when it comes to books, and I'm not a safe person to take into a bookstore of almost any kind. People who come over to my house are become aware of that very, very rapidly, because I'm really not comfortable until I'm just completely surrounded by books and I'm constantly reading. So it's really, really exciting. I could not think of a better incredible sponsor for this event, and of course for Dark Ozarks. We're very grateful. Follow them on Facebook.
Yes, and thank you, Bob. Thank you, Elise. You guys do a great job.
So, all of that to be said, we're plunging headlong into what may be our final off-the-cuff episode, celebrating our 2-year anniversary of Dark Ozarks.
I think so. We'll get back to more new territory on topics next week.
I, I just, we've come a long ways, I think, in terms of everything that we've done, all the things that we do. I, I realized 2 years ago,
Mhm.
2 years ago, I had not graduated to using a tabletop tripod for my phone. So I, I realized one of the big steps that we made for Dark Ozarks for myself is that I'm not actually having to hold the phone for 90 minutes for the
I
filming.
forgot about that.
I'm I'm not a tech person. I just play one on TV.
There you go. Yeah, when cramped fingers were occupational hazard of the show. Yes.
Oh, many times now. gotta oh, really potentially 4 topics. Although if we only get to 2, we may do one more off the cuff next week just to continue.
Yeah.
Um, non-ghost hauntings.
I see what you did there.
I know. I'm letting you kick this thing off. This is one of the most fascinating topics for me, because when you say the word haunting, people automatically go to ghost.
They automatically go to, the traditional lady in white flowing white gown or whatever, or soldier, etc. That's what a haunting is, but it really is a much broader topic than that. And we find that often the case in the Ozarks as well. Not that we don't love our apparitions, we do, and always glad to see them and interact. But I think one of my favorites, I have to say, is the Phantom House.
Yes.
Where the quote, haunted house itself is the phantom, irrespective of whether or not people are seen or seem to be present. And it's a rather long established kind of haunting in the Ozarks, starting in the 1800s with early settlers and phantom log cabins being seen. And a couple of varieties. One is where travelers or riders or people walking, if it was early enough, come across a usually what seems to be empty or abandoned log cabin. Sometimes they appear to be in use. Some will say they saw smoke coming out of the chimney, even furnished and looking as if someone just stepped outside. Other times they appear as if no one's been there in years. And they end up, sometimes they rest and spend the night, or sometimes they just go on by, ultimately talk to someone on down the road about the cabin to find there's never been a cabin there before.
Yes. It's now here's a question I'm curious about. Of course, I've been familiar with the Phantom Cabin since early 2000s. The Phantom Cabin mysteries or stories in terms of lore. I know the cabin aspect largely associated with the Ozarks. That was my actual first introduction. Ozark Ghost Stories by Judy Dr. Young and Richard Young. One of my favorite collections of stories. And so I associate that with the Ozarks. It seems to me, because of that, it seems to me that the Phantom Cabin is more regional in terms of its understanding, that not as many people are familiar with that as, say, like the Phantom Railroad or the Phantom Sailing Ship.
Right, that's true. And I think there are examples that I've read about in Appalachia as well. Um, so I'm not sure if it's more akin to mountainous areas or not. Although our friends over at Bordertown Paranormal have had their own experience with Phantom house that was not in a mountainous area. So it's not exclusive. And I'm not suggesting that has anything to do with geology or geography per se. And it's something I find it very intriguing because in some ways it's almost like a hologram or some sort of an illusion. But it's always described as more than a mirage, more defined, and people, some versions, people actually go inside. Sometimes they actually sleep overnight or whatever. And so they interact with the space. It's not a mirage they come up upon and suddenly it's gone.
Yes.
And I've never come up with a satisfactory explanation of how does that happen. Do you have thoughts?
Only conjecture, because it's something that we don't hear a lot about.
Right.
But I think we will definitely reference our folks in Kansas, our friends in Kansas, in regards to their documentation.
Mhm.
It's not exclusively reserved to cabins, but certainly in the lore, it is dealing with cabins.
Mhm.
And the one of the things in terms of looking for a root point or a root cause, it seems that we're looking for some sort of energy expenditure or energy vortex of some sort, that
Mhm.
energy, perhaps it's naturally occurring, perhaps it is human created, perhaps it is some combination of the two. That seems to be, pardon me, that seems to be a commonality for this type of thing, that there was something, there's a great deal of energy output, but understanding that that energy output could be a spiritual energy, which could come down to extreme trauma, extreme tragedy, and or hoodoo conjuring.
That's true. And another sort of common element is that it seems to generally be seen by travelers, people who are not that familiar with the area, so that they aren't shocked when they see this cabin to begin with. And
That is a commonality, yes.
the other thing that makes me that I do think of in that regard, there are a number of haunting stories in the region about travelers encountering ghosts as well. Um, and then, of course, there was also the very real threat to travelers of being, running into highwaymen or stopping at an inn and becoming the victim of violence. And so I don't know if there's a psychosomatic aspect to it that perhaps maybe a heightened level of anxiety or wariness might somehow contribute to a thought form of a cabin that's not there. I don't know.
And I think that's something to absolutely add into the mix. One of the interesting facets that you've already hit upon that I find really, really fascinating is that the individual who experiences the phenomena is not initially aware that it is phenomena.
Right, right. Where some of these other things that we'll talk about, they immediately are aware, oh, this is out of place.
Yes, yes. So that I don't know. I can't help but make some well, for the record, and I'm gonna find this. I just saw this book around here. Not that long ago. I'll get my hands on it again. It was a children's book of ghost stories that I grew up with. Notice a theme. That I grew up with a lot of books, but the ones that really stood out were ghosts and cryptids. Of course, in
That's
the
fair.
early 80s, we didn't really have the name cryptid. We just had monster.
Yeah, monster or creature. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was dealing with there's several stories in this small book that were dealing with phantom brakemen, phantom trains, the essentially Lincoln's funereal train being seen much later than than it was. These types of things over and over. And in this case, you take this. So, for example, there was the story of the train that went out, derailed and ran off the tracks, and basically the concept that the train died really along with everyone else. And we see this almost into time immemorial with the Flying Dutchman and the phantom ships. There's an anthropomorphic quality that is implied with these things, that the train is somehow a living being, and it has had a soul or has a soul in it, and then tragedy occurred and it died, and now its ghost is back. And we see these elements in traditional lore, literally ships, trains, planes, and automobiles. So it stands to reason that the same idea, if a location is somehow imbued with life, that it could somehow resonate through time in some sort of way.
That's true, but then we go back to the phantom cabin, and that doesn't hold true.
I know. Unless you could actually walk on the deck of the Flying Dutchman.
True.
Which probably doesn't end well.
Probably not. Or at best, you're going to end up wet. I would assume.
I would assume so as well. It is fascinating. I cannot help but associate the phenomena really with rural Southern mountain culture. Don't ask me why. I just can't help but connect the two.
Well, and I agree. And that's, like I said, the other example I know of where there are accounts are the Appalachian Mountains. So in the Western Appalachian Mountains. So that, if anyone out there has a theory on that or any additional information, we're interested, because I think the phantom cabin stories is definitely one that does not seem, it's the one that's not like the others in this category in some ways.
I agree. It functions really as a standalone. And we probably should share and also plug our friends from Kansas as well.
Yes. Boartown Paranormal, SEK Boartown Paranormal, over in Caney, Kansas. They have shared this account with us at events previously, and it is definitely theirs. But and it's not a log cabin, but it's a farmhouse that they were out investigating somewhere and passed this farmhouse. And on the way back, when they come back, the house is gone and the driveway is blocked off. But they had turned around in the driveway, and they could see their tire tracks on both sides of where the gate or whatever's there now. So there was evidence that they had driven in and turned around, but suddenly this gate's there and looks as if it had been there a long time, and the house is gone.
Yes. It is uniquely unsettling.
Definitely, because I think it calls into question your sense of relationship to the physical world, maybe your own sanity.
Mhm.
And I think that's what's unsettling about the Phantom Cabin stories too.
Yeah,
And I'm sure was for the people who encountered them.
I would think so. And and it also, the question of shifting time, and even the question of getting on the wrong side of that
Right.
is a very unsettling thing that starts, it worms its way into your mind and starts messing with you.
Well, yes, definitely. What happens if you get stuck on the other side and everything, and then you're suddenly in a very what normally we would consider a science fiction or fantasy realm, um, but suddenly it would be reality. So that that
And
goes beyond unsettling.
it does. And once you do start, moving into that realm of conjecture, and just the questions of really shifting dimensions
Mhm.
is something. And that's that's been thrown around for decades in regards to places like the Bermuda Triangle,
Mhm.
and a variety of locations. So to me it's very fascinating.
It is me as well. And then, some of the other kinds of things that come up, you alluded to are, trains and ships and so forth. And there are those accounts, train wrecks, uh, one being actually at Zombie Road, outside St. Louis, accounts of seeing apparitions there from the train wreck, which actually makes more sense than the actual lore about zombies escaped from the
It
insane
does.
asylum that goes along with urban legend. But um, there was a train wreck there with deaths, and so that's one example. There are examples. There's one down in southeast Missouri, and its application just escaped me, but it's one where a woman is seen routinely, and sometimes the train. And
Mm,
there was a train right there in I think the 1890s, and there were casualties. And so the conjecture is that the woman seen walking down the road is a victim from the train wreck. And sometimes she's seen by herself, and sometimes people actually do see the phantom train.
yes.
Um, and I think uh, trains are a fairly common phantom. And actually, as mentioned in the first Ghostbusters movie, the reporter mentioned his grandmother told the tale of the phantom train going by the farm. Um, and then, as you mentioned, Lincoln's Funerary Train is a famous ghost train that people described seeing even 30, 40 years later.
Yes. Something that I think is easy oh um to overlook in terms of train culture today, as opposed to train culture in the 19th century, early 20th century. Of course, trains are still a huge part of our infrastructure and our lives. And we've got, um, freight goes through a Hollister
Mhm.
between 10 and midnight regularly.
Same
I
here.
yeah. And this is completely an aside. um we've got well, this part is not an aside. Our interaction with trains is typically in terms of tourism, and of course we have that here, and that
Mhm.
a variety of locations. Folks can get on the Branson Scenic Railway and take short several hour uh tours, and that
Mhm.
kind of thing. Now, I will get back to my point. Short aside, I'm of course we've been in downtown many times for events when the Branson Scenic Railway comes through. Trains are always imposing, exciting events.
Yeah.
Really, when they come through, you and I've been down there the whole bit. Now, what is amazing to me, because it seemed when the Branson Scenic Railway comes through, and it's a 20th century, mid 20th century era train engine, and cars, you're like, wow, that's big and it's imposing, and it's, now it is coming through at what is classified as safe for pedestrians, essentially, speeds, because it's coming through during business hours and that sort of thing. The scheduled freights downtown that are like after 10 p.m.
Yeah, a lot faster.
I've been down there twice. Once when I was staying overnight at the Old English Inn, and it is honestly, I find it awe-inspiring. The massive freights that are just barreling through town, and everything shakes. It is. It's incredible.
I've had that experience staying the night there too, so I know exactly what you mean.
It does not. You can't escape the reality that Hollister is a railroad town, and I just love that. Now, coming back to our interaction with trains is either, from typically short excursion tourism trains here in the United States, or just seeing the freights, being aware of the industrial infrastructure, unless of course we work on the railroad or know someone who does. In contrast to that, before 1950, this was mass public transit, across, not just nationwide, but throughout North America.
Throughout the world, really. I mean, the Orient Express, for instance, is still, fairly infamous.
It is.
And, I think that's one thing too, people don't think about, that people, might get on the train, and if they were going cross country, particularly in the 1800s, they might be on that train for several days.
Yes.
Depending on where they're going.
And we're dealing with an infrastructure transportation system that was part of public consciousness for young and old. And when tragedy struck and a train derailed or was wrecked, we were dealing with a mass casualty event.
Yes. Which, you still can get those today, if with, sometimes there's an Amtrak wreck or something. But the amount of damage that was done with those trains, there were no safety regulations, and there were no safety regulations on the tracks, and so you were at the mercy of whether how often the railroad upgraded the ties and things like that. And so when things went wrong, they tended to go very, very wrong. And
yes.
You had boilers instead of diesel engines. And so not only did you have the wreck, but you often had explosions. So, carnage was more of an issue. And so I think that makes, sense why some of these things, certainly get imprinted. Just the amount of energy expended in these events, as well as being in the consciousness of people.
Yes.
The Funerary Train, I think, is a little different because obviously it didn't wreck. But it was in the public consciousness so much, Then there's other examples of trains being seen. And there's one in Arkansas, close to Crowley's Ridge too, that I've read accounts of people seeing the train. There's no record of a train wreck, but that that the whistle will be heard, or people will think they see the, old steam engine
Mm,
going through where it would have gone through however long ago. Um, and again, I think that a lot of that's just the amount of energy that's expended
mhm.
repetitively, over that track, maybe every day, every few days for however many decades. Um, and then one thing that we have found investigating is that trains have a very real effect on other hauntings, because um, trains create a huge EMF bubble. Um, and you often find that locations, when you're investigating, um, some of the first questions I'll ask are, how close is a railroad track and is it active? As well as running water, waterway or underground water, that kind of thing. But trains especially. And once you figure that out, you can ask Alex, you hear a train whistle, we get excited because that's usually when you're going to get EVPs. And we actually experimented and figured out that it creates bubbles that go out hundreds of yards, in all directions from the train. And talking with engineers and scientists figured out, first I thought, oh, it's got to be created from the generators or something, but it's not. It's the wheels against the rails. The friction
Against
is
that.
creating the EMF. And so that would make sense that, that would hold true for these, steam engines from 150 years ago as well, because it's the exact same function of those wheels against rails. And somehow it's something I think gets imprinted.
Yes, it really does. It was we were discussing. It reminded me of a bit back. I'm gonna get. I can't double check on my numbers, but I'm gonna be very close. Um, I had the opportunity to stop in Thebes, Illinois,
Mhm.
not terribly long ago. Um, Thebes is what's left of a river town on the
Mhm.
Mississippi, south of St. Louis, and just north of the original riverboat landings, etc., and the rather imposing, speaking of which, railroad bridge that crosses the Mississippi there is a little park with some documentation, and it made mention that originally in the 19th century, the Mississippi River between Cairo, the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi, and St. Louis, that stretch of just a couple hundred miles max, really not even that, uh, was the most treacherous portion of the Mississippi, with
Mhm.
a documentation, I believe, of 258 riverboat disasters
Yeah.
within that space. And I cannot help but think of the amount of energy expenditure, the amount of resonance, and ultimately I would think, and I suspect that it's there, but often not observed, paranormal phenomena on that stretch of the river between the Ohio River, the confluence of the Ohio up to St. Louis.
I think that's very fair, and we're aware of some circumstances like that we
Mhm.
aren't privy to talk about at this point. But
And the idea that in the mid 19th century, that sailing across the Atlantic was safer than getting on a riverboat on the Mississippi.
that's true. I mean, that's true. And so, not to mention all the other rivers. And people often don't really think about so many of the rivers being navigable that we consider now virtually no more than creeks. But um, so many of the rivers in the region have been silted in and have a lot of rock erosion because of logging, etc., that they're not navigable the way they used to be. And
Right.
so I think that's there were port towns in places that people today would go, what?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
for instance, here in the Joplin area in Jasper County, we had port towns and that didn't survive the Civil War, and anyone would go, a port here? But there were. And so, and there were so many disasters on these rivers that
Mhm.
and I know there are accounts of apparitions of seeing what seems to be people in the river in different places, particularly in the Arkansas River, that seem to be, you know, apparitions of people during a riverboat explosion or sinking. And
Mm.
so it would not shock me if there were instances of actually the boats being seen as well.
Yes. I think it's fascinating to me. I you know, one, of course, one location that comes to mind for me in terms of a port is Osceola.
Yes, and I don't know of an apparition of a boat there, but it certainly would not surprise me considering the amount of violence that happened there.
It very, very true. And to me, I mean, even apparitions aside, the fact that this was certainly it wasn't pre-railroad, but it was pre-widespread railroad infrastructure, and it was certainly pre-road. And so the idea that there was a point, it was short-lived, but a point that locations like Osceola and a lot of other towns in the Ozarks were directly connected to the rest of the world
Mm-hmm.
via the rivers is just really astounding, because there would have been a direct line of communication and transit between Osceola, Missouri, and New Orleans being an international port city of that era, as it still is today.
Exactly. And that places like Osceola were the center of commercial trade and business. And before it was burned was larger, you know, and more significant for business than say Springfield, Missouri.
Yes, much more so, and Springfield not having that port access,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and really not getting, realistically, not getting that same type of um, uh, really, commerce until the development of the railroad.
Exactly. And another example, and that people might have a little more affinity for, is phantom cars. Um,
Yes.
and probably one good example is the car on Highway 14.
Yes.
Do you want to tell that
Yes.
story?
Oh, I don't know it as well. I know that there's a consider, and you're referencing Highway 14 west of Ozark. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, between Ozark and Nixa. There's a number of documented occurrences. I believe some of them involve law enforcement, individuals being run off the road or running off the road in relationship to the car.
Mm-hmm.
And it to me, it's very unsettling, really, because of the when the incident does seem to occur, when the paranormal incident seems to occur, is that there's real life interaction. It's not just observance. It's
Mm-hmm.
that there's concern, there is reaction, there is response, there is in some cases damage to property as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know a lot about the origin point, but the reality of this interacting with mortals, so to speak, in somewhat negative ways is a bit unsettling.
It is, and my understanding is that it dates to the 1950s, and that there was a report of, an accident, um, and that policeman responding was passed by this car um, uh, on his way, and the car was speeding, etc. He went on to the accident and found that the car at the accident was the car he had seen speeding the other way.
Mhm.
Um, and then over time, other people have seen it, including law enforcement at times, and some to the point of thinking it was a real car that, maybe had been um, and swerving to avoid it, that kind of thing.
Yes, it's and these are locations, of course, for myself. I've driven that road many times.
Mhm.
It is a treacherous stretch of road, even with some modernizations of Highway 14. It is a very
It
curvy stretch of road. It's a relatively short stretch of road between Ozark and Nixa,
Mhm.
and there is something unsettling about these types of occurrences when, instead of, you know it was on a dark night in a land far away, it's like, no, wait a second, that's on the other side of the highway,
Yeah,
on your way to the
just down the
hardware
road.
store. It's
Yeah.
just down the road. Yeah, that's a very different thing. It also, this is a little bit of an aside, but is something I really enjoy about this type of investigation, and what we get to do at Dark Ozarks, is because all of these stories are directly tied to locations that are within comparative proximity to us.
Yes, yes, and that, that we get to go to, and, it's something, tangible, you feel like you can touch it, reach out and touch it. It's not something that happened halfway around the world.
Yes, very, very cool. And yeah, what are your thoughts? I know we've kind of covered a variety of these topics, but in regards to, say, like the phantom car, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, again, I kind of wonder about just the amount of, well, of course, again, you do have energy involved if there's a wreck, but um, the psychic, the mental energy expended by Americans with their cars.
Yes.
Um, and I'm not saying this is unique entirely to America, and that there probably are, I'm sure there are phantom cars other places too. But there is such a love affair with America and cars that um, you have to wonder if it is some form of a thought form that that our connection, or our one-way connection with the vehicle, really creates something of its own, and that it replays because of that.
I think that's very possible. I'm very fascinated, especially, you know, cars have gotten safer, they've gotten more fuel efficient, they've gotten more family friendly, they've gotten, not completely, but as a general rule, a lot less cool.
Yeah, for the most part, yes. Despite what
Uh,
I say.
and there is something extraordinarily potent about the, the even the mythos of the American muscle car.
Oh, definitely. And even
And
before that, I mean, just the mythos of just the car and freedom that it
yes,
represented, which was something totally new that I think today a lot of people have a hard time conceptualizing the idea of not being able to go jump in their car and drive 100 miles.
yes, I agree. It's, the this is sort of, the American muscle car, and of course, you know in the late 60s, in the 60s, I think Ford was instrumental in capitalizing upon the archetypal energy of this with the Mustang.
Mhm.
But there is such a comparison, and I think that it is something very intrinsic to American culture and the new American culture, that we love a fast horse.
Well, that's true, and that goes back a long ways.
Yes, it does. There's a, you know, that great sense of freedom, and personal empowerment,
Mhm.
as well as I think, you know, the energetic power of potency that all ties into this. It reminds me of something, actually tying back to the Kendrick House, the great horses of the Confederacy. Really, many of the great horses of this region uh, were intimately involved
Yeah.
with the Kendrick House, being brought into the parlor and staying in the parlor. Their hoof prints are still there,
Mhm.
and because a general or a leading officer of the Confederacy, their horse would be instantly recognizable by Union spies.
Exactly, and a number of horses in one place, definitely so.
Yeah.
And I think also, oh, so sort of a little trivia that maybe a lot of people don't know is that um, cavalry, and particularly Parson Rangers, particularly generally Confederate Parson Rangers, in this part of the country were renowned as some of the best horsemen in the war.
Yes. And fast forwarding, um, in terms of this motif, and I think it is a very powerful archetypal motif. It is something that that dates back in terms of American and European, and particularly Anglo-Saxon history, um, Anglo-Saxon and Norman history, because it was the great. I'm gonna diverge into my Lord of the Rings, but really, the great Viking horse lords of Normandy,
Yeah.
uh, the cavalry of that era, on horseback, that essentially created modern day England,
Hmm.
and and was instrumental in terms of an English uh, conquest, but we put conquest in quotes, the first attempted invasion of Ireland, and all of these factors figure very heavily into the psyche of the American story.
Very much so. I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly there.
And that,
And
yeah,
and that also, you know, since we're talking about ghosts or hauntings that are not ghosts, I mean, there's also, situations where animals are involved in particularly, and horses are one that we've had the occasion to investigate location where um, one of the more unsettling things that happen are that what seems to be a herd of horses run through and even uh, snort to the point of disturbing people's hair as if a horse is standing behind them.
yes, being in immediate proximity of ghost horses, that. And I love horses, so I don't know how I feel about that precisely, but I can't help but think that it's very unsettling if you feel them and you hear them, but you can't see them.
Exactly. I agree, and having experienced phantom coyotes, I can attest to something like that is rather unsettling. and and hearing what sounds like a herd of very large, heavy animals coming at you, I'm sure would be even in some ways more so.
Very, very, very true. Now this also reminds me, and we're referencing a location that we can't disclose at this point.
Right.
But there is a longstanding motif of a bridge in which horses are heard on the bridge.
That's true. That the Devil's Promenade bridge.
Yes.
And ironically, it's associated with the old bridge that's no longer there, which was a wooden bridge. And the lore is that you would hear horse galloping over the bridge. A lot of people say, oh, it had to be at midnight. Other people said no, to be anytime. Some people associated it with the devil. It was the devil's horse. Didn't know he rode one, but you know, what he needs one for. But anyway, that was a very consistent story. And then there are those who say that they have heard the same thing with the new modern bridge. I have not, but I've heard reference that supposedly it still can happen.
Well, and something that I find really, really personally fascinating in terms of real occurrences or real locations moving into the sort of the headspace of regional lore and then getting retranslated is there is one of the bridges, one of the long-standing bridges at Silver Dollar City is rigged to hear horses galloping, phantom horses galloping. You know, an earlier iteration of Silver Dollar City had these heavy ties into things like the Bald Knobbers, Alf Bolin, Devil's Promenade. I think Bluff Dweller's Cave, but in Knoll. And that one I haven't confirmed. If anybody is a historian with Silver Dollar City, please let me know. You can tell me I'm wrong. I don't think I am. Digging into
it, likely.
Yeah, where and I'll tell you what the thing is. There's a number of you know, they've sculpted, and when we're talking back in the 60s and 70s, sculpting areas that you walk through, whether it's part of especially the Mine restaurant and several locations that they're recreating Ozark caves, you know, or the motif of an Ozark cave, separate from Marvel Cave, which is, you know, has always been there. That I grew up interacting with these spaces, love these spaces, they're incredible. And then several years ago went to Knoll and went to Bluff Dweller's Cave and walk in and I'm like, there is something eerily familiar about this space and I've never been in it before. Why is this so familiar? Why is this so familiar? I'm like, wait a second, I've been in a copy of this. And I think that's really cool. What I think is really powerful and interesting is that particular iteration, that generation of Silver Dollar City while it was being built, really tied into this, what I would consider to be the psychological darkness of the Ozarks. Again, the Bald Knobbers, Alf Bolin, the burning of Osceola. This is part of the George Kiefer murals. It is part of the motif. It's never overtly stated. We have the phantom horses of Devil's Promenade running across the bridge. There's a haunted quality that is never overtly stated, but it is written into, is baked into the motif, and I just love that.
Well, and I think in part, I mean, this is conjecture on my point, but my guess, I'll call it an educated guess, is that particularly in the early days, they were looking at being a regional attraction. They had to attract regionally before they could expand nationally. And so you put in elements that are familiar, so that people go, oh, yeah. Even if they can't name it, I've heard, this is familiar because they've heard a story or whatever, grandpa used to tell a story about, horses ran across a bridge or whatever. And so it builds rapport with your audience for credibility without having to beg for it. And
Yeah.
I mean, so it really, it's very smart way to do it. And then as it became the attraction and destination itself, they didn't have to rely on that as much.
Yes. Oh, but I love those aspects, and I love the remaining portions of the park that are all still there, which fortunately there's still a large number of them. Uh, a little bit of an aside, but plug to Bluff Dwellers Cave. That's an incredible space.
It is. It really is. Anyone that hasn't been there ought to go. It's been a few years since I've been there, but it actually, I don't know, there's something there that resonates with me.
Same, very much same. Um, Speaking of animals, I think I've spoken about this a while back. My it's not something I think about a lot. Back in the 70s, my family basically had a phantom dog experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a dog that had been part of the family for two decades, well, almost 3 decades, and then the sounds of the dog showing up in the kitchen
Yeah.
after the dog is gone. I grew up with that story. This is a story that directly related from my mom, my grandmother. This is not fiction. This happened. And again, in regards to so much paranormal experience, when it happens, do we have an explanation for it? No, but we know that it happened.
Exactly. I mean, and then we have a similar story in my family um, with the dog. Um, during the time that my dad was very ill and about to pass, and his favorite dog basically showed up
Yeah.
after being deceased a number of years, and startling a family member. And so, and I know other people who've had similar stories, experiences, and so, um, and of course, I think that kind of goes to the fact that once we get aside from the human egocentric view that we're the only ones that would come back and haunt anything, that we are dealing with living beings there, that their energy is there, and probably whatever happens to us happens to them. We're probably
Yes.
not as unique as as we like to think we
As we
are.
like to think we are. I think that's very, very fair. And of course, I've interacted with closely. I grew up on a farm, interacted closely with a large number of animals that, for lack of a better word, they were just different,
Mhm.
and they could sense things that regular people couldn't, and they could know things, and they seem to have a type of intuition that very few human beings, being able to essentially see beyond the veil in many cases. That
And I've always ascribed to the view that that's just something that, to a degree, that humanity has lost or has just forgotten how to use. I wouldn't necessarily say lost, because certainly some are tapped in more than others, but we don't make use of those facilities the way that we did in times past, I don't think, and animals do.
and animals do. I very much agree with that. And perhaps that's a good place to shift subjects a little bit to a place that I think has an enormous amount of resonance, which, and one of my favorite places to go, I know I'm not alone on that, which is Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
There you go. I think I think that is a fascinating subject to delve into.
Eureka Springs is an anomaly within the Ozarks on multiple levels, and it's essentially two mountainsides and the mountain valley in between, the Boston Mountains in northwest Arkansas, for people who might not be familiar with it. And Eureka was officially founded in July 4th, 1874, and has a very small standing population today, although it is a renowned tourist location. And hoping to I'll actually get down there next month. Looking forward to getting down there next month for some research and the White Street Art Show. The location, the mountains, that particular mountain, East Mountain, West Mountain itself were noted for their many springs.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where Eureka Springs, that is from whence Eureka Springs sprang. Sometimes I question my use of the English language. But now this is something that I think is interesting. This, much like hot springs, has the aura of ancient and primeval credibility, because there are a lot of, both locations have the same legend. Native American Indian tribes utilized the springs for healing. The springs were a location of truce, that if warring tribes were in conflict, anyone who made it to the springs was safe and would be cared for before apparently you'd walk out beyond the boundary and then they kill you.
Well,
and it's like home base if you're playing tag, except we behead you.
yeah,
and on certainly on a just a resonating energy level, I can't help but think that both of these locations are, that there is a lot of energy, and there's a lot of connection with something more. And I can't help but think that the Osage and the Caddo were, recognize that.
Yeah.
To a degree, I question the simplicity of that narrative, because most of the documentation we see is in response to 19th century or latter 19th century tourism.
Yeah.
Saying, come to our healing springs, the Indians used to use it, you should too.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see more documentation. Whether they were regarded as healing springs, I think Eureka Springs certainly is notable because it would have been a consistent at the time a consistent quality water source. And whether they were healing or not, whether it was a truce space for the tribes or not, it's simply human nature to seek out clean water. So
and often in the past, that was a resource that was hard to find. So
yes, so I think that we can safely say that there was something there prior to European settlement or American settlement in that regard. And Eureka Springs really began to get a foothold post Civil War, and it was being marketed to a regional or a semi-nationally as a healing spring. Come drink the water, you'll get well. And this, of course, was an era that was pre-modern medicine, pre-antibiotic, and realistically, I mean, if you were in low country, clean water by itself would have been hard to come by, and dysentery was a real thing.
Mhm.
So, even something that we take so utterly for granted,
Yeah,
potable clean water, that we just take completely for granted. The idea that there could have been a lot of people in areas that had dirty water and were not aware of that, making the pains to come to Eureka Springs and actually get water that was not giving them dysentery, could have quote unquote healed them.
well, that's true. I mean, that's true. Just being there long enough to uh, for the body to cure itself
Hmm.
in times before any medicine available.
Yeah, and so over time, Eureka was very fortunate to have some very wealthy and forward thinking um, planners, particularly, and his name escapes me, but the individual who built the Crescent Hotel, which opened in 1886, and was also instrumental for bringing the railroad in, and conveniently making sure that not only was the railroad available, but that the railroad station, which is quite beautiful and still standing, was just a short carriage ride from the base of the mountain up to his hotel. And of course, the Crescent has an extremely an intense history, but the whole town has an intense history. And his development in the mid 1880s spurred a Victorian and then an Edwardian golden age of building. So, and many of those structures are still there. So, being able to see these unbelievably beautiful Victorian and Edwardian era homes and businesses, or storefronts, is just incredible. I do think that and I don't know whether it's the water, the coursing streams of water throughout the mountains. I don't know. It may be the crystalline structure beneath. It may be something else entirely. There is an energy to the place that is to me anyway, is very different than the surrounding area and is very unique.
I think that's fair. And well, and I also think part of it is, for me anyway, is the architecture, is the almost the sense that you are, you know, walking into a mountain village in Central Europe or something. Um, that it allows you to, suspend belief and feel like you are actually walking into a different reality or realm in a way,
Yes.
apart from ordinary day to day.
It to me, it very much is. I was asked by a friend recently if I would if I could live anywhere in the Ozarks, would I choose Eureka Springs? At some point, it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility. But one of the things that I love is being a visitor to Eureka Springs.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to get at. I think I don't know that I would want to live there. It is not that I dislike it in any way, but I think visiting has more of a magical quality than living
I
there, perhaps.
The fact that when I am there, it is a heightened reality. It
Yeah,
is there's not many places that are so that the environment is all consuming in the
yeah,
sense, normally you have to go to a very high end, like a theme park,
yeah.
to step into an environment that is quote unquote themed in 360 degrees.
I think that's a good analogy for what I was trying to say. It has that quality to it that um, that you have just walked into something that has been orchestrated for you and for your senses.
Yes, and in this case, it's just an incredible high degree of preservation, really.
Hmm.
That and that adds a dimension that you can't get in even the highest end theme park, because you in the back of your mind, unless you're a child, this was built recently to
Yeah.
create this experience. And in the case of Eureka, it wasn't. This was a fully functional town in the 1880s. Essentially, a lot of the architecture that we're talking about is really between basically 1880 to 1910. A little bit later, maybe 1915. And the Basin Park Hotel was finished in 1909. So I think that's a decent. The Crescent was finished in 1886, and the Basin Park Hotel was finished in 1909, and it's really kind of that approximate era. A lot of paranormal activity is associated throughout the town.
Yes, and of course the Crescent has gotten a lot of press in that regard in recent years with various reality TV shows, etc.
Yes.
And not slighting it, but since it is talked about so much,
Yes.
what other place do you find the most interesting?
There's several. I love walking the streets of Eureka Springs at night, or in the evening. I shouldn't say at night and freak people out. I'm not walking by your house at 1 o'clock in the morning. We're talking, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Because, and also, outside of the immediate business district, this is all residential.
Yeah.
These are just folks' homes and very beautiful homes, but it's just people's homes. There are several locations. I've had the opportunity to stay at the Basin Park Hotel multiple times. Basin Park has an incredible history as well. It is currently owned and has been restored by the same family and company that operates the Crescent Hotel. And I've not had a specific incident. Like I say, I've stayed at the Basin 4 or 5 times. I've not had a specific incident. The last time that I was staying there, the room itself, just to me anyway, had a comparatively friendly but existent presence. I kept walking into the bathroom expecting to see somebody, and not really, because I wasn't there. Bear in mind, I wasn't there to go see a ghost. I was there to go to the restaurant, go to the bar and just enjoy myself, just have a night or two away. That I think was most notable. The Palace Bathhouse, which is a boutique hotel around the corner, still in downtown, but a little bit higher up on the mountain. Opened in the early 20th century. I find it fascinating because it was built as a brothel. And we get the idea sort of outside of the Western saloon brothel motif. We get the idea that brothels in America and North America would have had some sort of appropriate cover. It's built as a hotel, wink wink, it's really a brothel. No, the Palace apparently was built as a brothel, and was opened as a high-end brothel, and that is apparent when you look at the architecture.
Very pretty.
Yeah, and the
signage.
And the signage is very deliberately suggestive that there's certain activity that's going to be going on, and there's a number of of paranormal incidences that have been documented at the location. I'm looking forward, hopefully soon. I've spoken with the general manager a while back, did a short phone interview, and I'm hoping that we can continue that soon. There's that. Now for me, that there's 2 things. We have I have heard a story that was, I'm not fully ready to share at this point, but it was pretty intense in terms of a couple who checked in and really had basically a pretty intense experience overnight. The general manager that I spoke to not very long ago said, "Don't worry, all of our ghosts are friendly. It's perfectly fine." I'd love to just get into the space, but
Mhm.
there are layers and layers of resonance in Eureka. And for me, it particularly that walk up there's a point. Oh, this was a couple of years ago as well. It was right across from the Palace Bathhouse. There's a number of old structures and a pretty sharp cliff
Mhm.
as well. I'm up there photographing at night. Dale was with me, actually. We'd gone down just for the evening to do some photography, also to eat at my favorite Thai restaurant in the entire world. But but was down there, and there was a very, it wasn't on the side of the road of the palace, it was on the opposing side of the street.
Mhm.
um but there was just a really strong pushback
Mm.
that really said, you know what, don't be in this space.
That's fair. And sometimes when you have a unique um, natural space, and you have the mountains there and everything, sometimes the uniqueness of the physical space itself, aside from construction, architecture, um, lends itself to energies and presences, I think.
It does. It is a in one sense, I think that your experience is a very magical and fairy tale location.
Mhm.
um but the woods, the mountains, the forest, the architecture, the caves, the springs, all of these things are, oh, very otherworldly.
Mhm.
and,
And
and
I have to wonder myself if a lot of that doesn't predate the city, and this is more a function of the land itself.
I think to a large degree it really can be. It also, is sort of that issue of art imitating life, life imitating art. The idea that these energies have somehow informed a lot of the structures.
Oh, I think that's entirely possible. Yeah.
It's there's a location I had the opportunity to step into a historic location that's actually just around the street from the palace, so it's that same location. um Definitely a presence in the basement.
Mhm.
Not necessarily an unfriendly one, but definitely a presence, definitely within that space. There's just like I said, there are layers of presences, of sentience,
Mhm.
sort of like seasons layered upon themselves that are in some senses replaying, in some senses it can be, for me, a very melancholy, bittersweet location.
Mhm.
And I mean that in the best possible way. I
Yeah, I mean, melancholy does not have to necessarily be negative.
It's very, very powerful, of course. But the one of only two times that I have been so scared that I left a location uh was in Eureka Springs, at the Crescent Hotel.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and that, I'm not mm, I'm not proud of that. I'm not ashamed of that. It happened.
well,
Um,
yeah.
you know,
Uh,
the
I think that there are times that retreating, or however you want to phrase it, is a wise and prudent course of action. And just to barge forward foolishly is as dangerous as anything, and more dangerous than necessarily bolting, although bolting may be embarrassing.
It was, and then this thus far, this particular, this type of experience has only happened to me twice in my life.
Mhm.
I do find it interesting. I think it's important to note, and this might be a good place for us to sort of conclude
Mhm.
with these stories, because they're very similar in their essence, that I was not hunting a paranormal experience when they occurred
Right.
at all. It was not. It was not remotely what I was doing, and and in both cases, it predated um, my formal interest in the paranormal. I've always been interested in strange stuff and folklore and ghost stories and that kind of stuff, but wasn't something that I was not actively involved in investigation. It was a long time before you and I were working together. It was way before Dark Ozarks, so on and so forth. So and in both cases, I went into the space completely cold. There, nobody had told me it was haunted. Nobody told me there was paranormal stuff there. I was there just because of the history and the beauty of the location. It was at the Crescent Hotel, and it is just it these structures that we're talking about are just astoundingly beautiful.
They are. They really are. If you are not familiar with them.
It is, you walk into the space and it is awe-inspiring. And went in, took my camera, went up to the fourth floor, was out on the sky bar. It was before they put the overhang. And these are locations, this is a location I've been back to many, many times, never
Mhm.
had the same experience. And I'm standing on the fourth floor looking out over the mountains, and I'm suddenly made aware that there is a very, very unhappy energy standing directly over my left shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's an energy that does not like me and does not want me in this space. And I did not physically see something, but clearly I went from I'm here to photograph this beautiful location and oh, look at the view,
Mhm.
to my heart rate is going through the roof. I am too scared to get in the elevator because whatever this thing is might follow me, and I run down the stairs. I don't
Happens.
know. Yeah, it's whatever that was did not like me. And like I said, I've been back to the Crescent many times, day and night. I'm very proud of the fact that not only have I gone back multiple times, I've photographed the Crescent um, alone after 11 p.m. on all 5 floors, including the basement. I've been down in the basement. I've been down in the quote unquote
Morgue.
what's the morgue,
Uh-huh.
uh, the whole bit on tours, etc. The only thing I can conclude is either that the manifestation of that particular energy hasn't occurred since while I was there, or it has decided it likes me, and I don't know what that says about me or it.
Or it's
But
ignoring you, one of the two.
or it's completely ignoring me. It's going, oh crap, he's back. Fine, whatever. I don't know, but that was that was a very, very unique experience. Now, and I think this is a fun topic just to discuss a little bit. And I'm curious as to your thoughts. I was definitely a newbie on, engaging in this kind of space.
Yeah.
And certainly coming from a background at that time that engaging in this kind of space, like, no, you don't ever step into a space like this. And I definitely had that mindset. I got back up here to Branson later that afternoon. I'm like, okay, that was totally freaky. Did not like that. Never going to deal with that again. No, I'm good. And over the course,
Until you met me, right?
well, it started, it definitely helped. It started working on me maybe 6 to 8 months later. I kind of stored it away. This would have been 2008. So probably by Christmas of 2008. That was April of 2008. So by Christmas, I was just kind of percolating. And the more it percolated, the more I'm like, I want to go back.
Mhm.
I don't know why. And various locations in Eureka Springs has done that it just continues to beckon me back.
Oh, there's definitely places like that there and elsewhere. I can understand, and having that kind of experience, my reaction always, if there's something that I get a lot of pushback from, is, "Oh, I'm going back because, well, we're not leaving it there."
It's I think all of these locations are incredibly fascinating. Again, I would encourage listeners, viewers, go visit, go see these places.
Definitely. Explore your surroundings, explore your background and your backyard, so to speak. And if you're not in this area and you can't get here, explore your own backyard, because there's great mysteries everywhere.
There are, and of course we are very privileged and I just very feel incredibly fortunate that we get to dedicate as much time as we do to these areas in the Ozarks. But if you're not in the Ozarks, there are layers and layers and layers of unique and incredible history. You just have to dig a little bit. If you're not familiar with it, you just have to dig a little bit.
That's right. Scratch the surface and see what comes up.
You'll find stuff. I guarantee you will find stuff, and it's going to be great.
It is. So I think that's probably a good place to end for tonight. We will be back next week. Again, get your tickets for the Ritchie Mansion before they're gone, and at paranormalsciencelab.com, and have a good week.
Absolutely. We thank you all. Thanks for following Dark Ozarks. It means the world to us. And Lisa, Alex, thank you guys. This is awesome.
Yes. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Alex.